So we just heard Chancellor Olaf Scholz from Germany say that we are facing several global challenges which have diverted funds from the world's poorest nations. So global cooperation is being tested. And just this week, despite the ongoing war in Ukraine, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was in New York chairing the UN Security Council. That very body meant to be resolving conflict. So we are here to talk about what we can all do about this. And I'll try to challenge you both to say, what do you think is the path for peace in Ukraine? $100 million question. Stefan, would you start?
It is $100 million. First, I think that the outcome of this should be guided by the wish of Ukraine. We cannot sit outside and say what should happen in Ukraine. I think there are two very important things to have in mind now. First is Russia cannot win this war. We cannot let Russia win this war, because if we do, the international order is wasted. Then any country in the world can expect to be attacked anyway, because we have to adhere to international order, the UN Charter, in our case, the European Security Order as well. The second is that Ukraine must prevail as an independent state. With those two things in mind, well, we have to, of course, try to get into a position where it is possible to talk about peace as well. So in the midst of this war, yes, let's also prepare for the next phase, which is peace. But right now, peace right now requires that Russia cannot win this war.
How is this viewed from South Africa, Phumzile?
Well, as you've seen, China getting...
Your mic.
As you've seen China getting close to this issue, they are an important stakeholder in that context. I think all of those who are very close to China need to do everything they can to make sure that China can bring Russia to the table. Because my experience in these peace deals is that the two fighting parties must want to get to the peace table for the peace to be real. So we feel Ukraine wants to be at the peace table. We need to make Russia to also want to be at the peace table. And I don't think that right now we have that scenario.
You just came here directly from Ethiopia, where you've been trying to negotiate at least a weapon, stopping the weapon use or peace treaty in Ethiopia between the government and the Tigray province. Is there any lessons learned from the work you've been doing there?
No, definitely. I mean, there are similarities and lots of differences in that scenario. Obviously, for both countries, we have lost lives unnecessarily, lives of civilians. Women have experienced a lot of abuse, trafficking, sexual violence, destroy of infrastructure, destroy of economy on both sides. But also, these countries, both of them are very different. Ethiopia is a country of 120 million people. Ukraine is a country of 42 million people. Ukraine is a country with a population that has that has had a foreigner coming into their country. In Ethiopia, it is a civil war. So that already changes the dynamics. Ethiopia is a black country. Ukraine is a white country. International communities, such as ourselves as a global community, are much more attuned to what is happening in Ukraine than we are in Ethiopia, and that shows a difference of the way in which we treat these two countries. But ultimately, in both countries, innocent lives are being lost, and the people who have nothing to do with what is happening are the ones that are suffering: children, old people, etc. And that is what we have to focus on. It doesn't matter where the person is, what color they are. We have to make sure we stop the war for everybody.
Stefan, Phumzile mentioned China's possible route to getting the Russians to maybe view a peace treaty or stop the war and the aggression in Ukraine. What's your view on the possibilities of bringing, of China having a role in that? We saw Macron went to Beijing and also talked about the possibility. Do you think they can do something about that?
First, I think we need to gather under the UN flag. The United Nations, I think, need to have the most important role in this. Then you, of course, can use actors, but I think UN need to be in the center of this. We need to strengthen the United Nations, and we saw that the United Nations could definitely contribute when it comes to this agreement on wheat. Then again, I mean, China, to be honest, China says we want to be Russia's friend without limits, and they outlined certain points that they wanted to, but that wasn't a proposal. We should look into it anyway, but the way it seemed, the way those points were more a list from Moscow than I think a peace agreement would require. So once you go into that stage, peace talking or ceasefire, peace talking, UN in the middle, you have to deal with issues of territory, of NATO, EU, compensation for war damage, war crimes and all that. So all that agenda will be there, and that is why I think, no, I don't think, I'm convinced that the United Nations have to be in the middle of that. But if you can use countries or other actors in that process, yes, go ahead. But those involved in that need to have trust from both sides.
I think the most promising part of the Chinese statement was that it started its statement with all countries' right to territorial integrity, because I think that's what the Ukraine war really is about. But I agree with you that we probably, the rest of it was a little bit too soft to think that that will be the big solution. But I think the big challenge now is seeing that the Ukraine war is going on with its effects on the rest of the world. And the question is also, how will the support play out? One of the issues that I think is a bit difficult with American policies is that it seems like all big international politics becomes dividing issues in American politics. So you have Trump stating that you should not continue to support Ukraine. You have DeSantis saying something of the same. How do you feel? Are you sure that the Americans will stand by Ukraine? We should have an American politician here now, I think. Yeah.
I'm hoping they will. So far, they have been supportive of Ukraine, but also I think it's important to be concerned about the region. In solving the Ukraine situation, they must also think about how they stabilize the area. If I think again of the Horn of Africa, and in the context of Ethiopia, it's important to solve Ethiopia, solve Somalia, solve Sudan, if possible, without picking up one country, because I mean it's a bad neighborhood. There's just problem all the time. If it's not in one country and it's in the other country, And I worry for Ukraine and the countries in that neighborhood that they must not be left in a situation where you end this war and then something happens so that it just becomes, we know the Middle East has become just unstable forever, and you would like all the countries there to be stable, and you don't want to see this transmitted to that part of the world again. So yes, it's about Ukraine, but it's also bigger than Ukraine. It's about Ethiopia, and it's bigger than Ethiopia as well.
I think a lot of...
And America can't stay out of it.
Yeah. But I think a lot of the, people who are commenting and seeing is that the Ukraine war is now sort of lingering into this bigger division in the world, which is driven by US-China competition and challenges between them. And that is also divides, the world and demanding other countries to stand by either China or the US in these types of conflicts. How do you feel that the US-China relationship is affecting, for example, what's happened in Africa? Is there a competition? Can Africa get the US more interested in Africa to compete with the Chinese interests, for example?
Well, I mean, it feels to me that we've gone back to the East-West tension that we used to have, except that this time it feels like some of the negotiations between the East, West spies and so on that used to happen in smoke-filled rooms are no more happening. We want them to go to the smoke-filled rooms and negotiate and try to find solutions. The tension just seemed to have become so intense, also because the ordinary citizens, have become part and parcel of those tensions. Ordinary people have been given permission to be racist, homophobic, whatever. Everybody who has bad behavior feel emboldened to be as bad as they can be. And I think this is really dangerous to the world, where no one now seems to have any inhibition about bad behavior. So it's not just about what is happening between the states, it's also what is happening amongst the people of all the countries. The anti-human rights movement that is hitting the world is going across the world. And I feel the progressive forces are not as strong as the anti-rights movement. The pushback against the pushback is just not strong enough. And I think us here, really, we need not to pick on soft issues and really confront these really big issues that are creating a crisis for the world.
Stefan, how do you feel that the US-China competition is affecting the global cooperation on multilateral issues?
I think this struggle between two superpowers is definitely affecting the rest of the world, and not least the discussion decoupling or not decoupling. Are you on that side or on that side? And again, we need to gather under the UN flag to find a common path forward. You have two superpowers competing, and competition can be good, but you can never let it go into military conflict. So you have to have a clear line, meaning that they also have to find issues cooperating on. And we don't lack issues that we need to cooperate on, climate being one of them, health being another one, and fighting poverty a third one, and so on. So we have terrorism, organized crime. We have so many issues that we need to cooperate on. And I am afraid that if we let this develop into something, you have China, Russia, a few other countries, and then you have Europe and US and Australia, South Korea, Japan, and then you have an African continent being left out, rightly so. I mean, that feeling is relevant. So then we have created something that is very close to 1984. if you remember the book 1984, George Orwell, where you had some super blocks in the world only with hostility, built on hostility, and that is a very risky development. So we have to be very careful now and making sure that we also bridge gaps. And can I just end by saying, I believe that the former Prime Minister of Australia, Kevin Rudd, was right when he pointed out that Russia-China need to deal with this relation, China-US, in such a way that they find, okay, here are the red lines, respect those red lines. Here is a segment where you can compete, we must compete, production, whatever it is, and there is a third segment where you need to compete. Find issues where you cooperate. So red lines, competition, cooperation, so that you keep the dialogue, keep the relation, avoid military conflicts.
Well, we are at the Global Citizen now, and I think one of the things that we don't really know is what the state of global citizenship is. How do we feel connected in this world? And I think it's up until now we have not been able to measure that. So joining us from the audience today is Hassan Damnourieh from the internationalist think tank Global Nation. Hassan, you are announcing a new annual index that will be for the first time demonstrate year by year whether the global community is taking meaningful steps forward. What have you found?
Thank you so much, Prime Minister and other Prime Minister and Deputy President. It's such an esteemed panel, and it's great to join you. So at Global Nation, like many of you, I'm sure, we feel that in order to drive a problem forward to a solution, you have to first understand it. And like Prime Minister Solberg said, is we don't actually have any kind of yardstick or measurement for how are we doing when it comes to global solidarity. So today we're announcing the work to create a scorecard or index for a global solidarity that we call the Global Solidarity Report. It'll be launched at the UN General Assembly high-level week in September. And today we've had a great listening exercise as we finalize that, but also call for supporters to join their voice with ours. We're going to analyze this problem of solidarity in three parts. Number one, public attitudes. Are people supportive of the international cooperation that their governments would need to carry out? Number two, institutions. Do we have institutions with the resources, with everything that they need to take action on the basis of that solidarity? And thirdly, the outcomes of collaboration. Are we actually achieving anything? Even if we haven't solved these problems, are there steps forward that we can take back to people and show that this thing works? Now, all of the data and all of the analysis is, of course, yet to be completed and will be published in September. But today, we're announcing a couple of teasers from the public opinion data we've been gathering with the help of our partners, Glocalities. And we thought, since we're here in New York, we would let you know what some of the Americans that have been surveyed, a representative large sample of Americans, have told us. And what they've told us is that in America, there is more trust in the UN than there is in their own government. Now, that says something about the lack of trust in government, but it also says something powerful about trust in the UN. And actually, although neither of those were a majority of Americans, 57%, say they want the UN to be strengthened in order to prevent countries from bullying other countries. Now, this does not mean that we've solved everything, but it does offer chinks of hope, glimmers of the potential for solutions, if only we can actually fix the institutional side and also then start delivering some outcomes from collaboration. Thanks.
Well, we are out of time, so I will not ask you to respond to this, but let's just say it was a glimpse of hope. The American public, in fact, likes the UN better than their government. As a politician, I'm not sure I'm so happy. As a globalist, yes. Thank you.